Okay, you're dreaming of that perfect getaway, maybe thinking about Maui, soaking up the sun. But then reality hits, how much is that rental car going to set you back?
Yeah, it's always the question, isn't it? And prices can be, well, surprisingly volatile, even in a place like Maui. They fluctuate based on things that aren't always obvious.
That's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're looking specifically into the Maui rental car market right now, mid-June 2025.
And we're pulling all this info directly from the source material you shared with us. Lots of data points to sift through.
Right, so our mission here, we want to cut through all those numbers, those trends, and really pull out the most important bits for you.
Exactly. Help you understand what's actually driving the prices,
Yeah.
whether you're actively planning a trip or maybe you're just fascinated by travel
Or
economics.
just enjoy figuring out how these markets tick, yeah.
Totally.
So let's unpack this source material, see what secrets it holds for
All
us.
right, let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the immediate picture. What's happening right now? The source gives us this snapshot for the rental week that kicks off June 16th, 2025.
Right. Specifically, looking at pickups from Kahului Airport, OGG.
And the main headline, according to the source, is that for most car types, prices are actually down moderately compared to last week.
And last week was already considered pretty low.
Exactly. Low levels is what the source said. So we're seeing some decent drops here. Economy cars down 4%, 226 sides a week. That's from 6T.
Okay.
Mid-size dropped 14% to $238, also 6T. Jeeps are down 12%, $376 from Thrifty this time.
Interesting switch there.
Yeah. Convertibles dipped quite a bit, 21% down to $496, back to 6T. And regular SUVs saw a big drop too, 19% down to 251 categories.
Great.
Quite a few decreases, mostly moderate across those common categories.
All right, a pretty consistent downward trend there.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets, really interesting. A total contrast.
Okay. What's the flip side?
The source points out two categories saw massive spikes. Prices more than doubled just in the last week. Doubled. Wow. Which ones?
We're talking the bigger vehicles. So 7-seat SUVs, they shot up, get this, 102%.
Whoa.
Yeah, to $718 a week from budget. And minivans, hold on to your hats here, they surged a massive 122% to $873 a week.
122%. Good grief. That's from Payless, you said.
That's from Payless, yeah. I mean, those aren't small bumps. Those are huge jumps for the people movers.
And it's fascinating. The source sort of floats a potential why for those specific spikes, right, in the larger vehicles.
Yeah, what's the theory?
They hypothesize it could be reflecting, the seasonal summer increase in family travel. Maybe larger groups, families with kids are starting their vacations now, and that's driving up demand specifically for those bigger car types.
That makes sense. And you can also see this real battle for market share playing out, according to the source.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, just last week, Thrifty apparently had the lowest price across all the categories, which is pretty aggressive.
Right, that's a bold move.
But this week, 6XT has clearly countered. They've claimed the lowest price in 4 out of the 7 categories tracked.
Ah, okay, so a direct response. That kind of back and forth competition, well, that directly impacts the prices you end up seeing when you go to book.
Absolutely. So that's the picture right now, this week. Mostly down, but these surprising huge spikes for the bigger vehicles, and you see the companies actively competing.
Okay, so given all that churn this week, what does the data suggest about where prices are heading? Looking into the near future, June, July.
Yeah, good question. Let's look ahead.
The general forecast, based on what the source is seeing in advance reservation prices, is that they're actually expected to stay relatively flat, over the next few weeks going into mid-July.
Flat, okay. And what about the big holiday coming up, July 4th? Usually you'd expect a price bump, right?
You would. But the source notes something pretty surprising here. That typical holiday bump we might expect in the advance prices, it's almost completely evaporated.
Gone.
Pretty much. They give specific data points, too. So, an economy car booked today, June 15th, for the week starting July 6th, right after the holiday, from OGG, is priced at $260 a week.
$260.
Now, just 1 week ago, that same booking was $324.
Wow, quite a drop.
And 2 weeks ago, it was way higher, $451. So this is 3 weeks straight of decreasing advance prices for that holiday period.
3 weeks running, that's a clear trend.
Yeah, and the source mentions the same trend holds for the off-airport numbers, too.
And how does that compare to last year? Was it similar?
Not at all. The source points out last year, rental rates for July 4th rose sharply from the June prices. They got close to $500 a week, even for the cheapest car.
Okay, so big difference this year then.
Huge difference. So the implication, based on this current trend, is that a really dramatic price increase for the July 4th holiday this year seems, well, pretty unlikely. That sustained drop in the advanced booking prices seems to reflect weaker demand than maybe they anticipated for that period.
Oh, demand.
Okay. Now, there's still time, obviously. But that current lowest price we mentioned earlier, the $226 for an economy car, that kind of sets a floor, you know? Prices for the holiday probably aren't going to drop much below that.
Right. There's a bottom limit. But there's always a bit of unpredictability, isn't there? Did the source mention any potential curveballs?
Absolutely. They always do, right? They caution there's still a small possibility, a chance of a last-minute squeeze that could lead to a surge.
A squeeze, even with weak demand.
Yeah, and what's kind of counterintuitive, they note, is this surge isn't necessarily because of strong demand suddenly appearing out of nowhere.
Okay.
It can happen if the rental companies, maybe because they were expecting weaker demand, they manage their fleets or staffing levels down, and then they fall behind on logistics, on operations.
Ah, I see.
So even a small, unexpected bump in demand can cause prices to shoot up really fast just because they're caught, flat-footed.
Okay, so they can't meet even a small surge if they're not prepared.
Exactly. And the source says they've seen this scenario play out many, many times before.
Wow, that's fascinating. So weak demand could still lead to a price surge if the operation side isn't keeping up.
Precisely.
So for anyone planning for that Independence Day week, the source is suggesting maybe locking in the current relatively low price might be a smart move, just to hedge your bets against that unpredictable last-minute operational squeeze.
That seems to be the suggestion, yeah. Hedge your bets given that potential volatility.
Okay, that actually leads us nicely into strategy. Let's talk about some common questions travelers have. First one, can you actually save money booking last minute?
Right, the age-old question. Well, based on the source's tracking, going back to mid-December 2024, the general trend has been that prices closer to the rental date have usually stayed below the prices booked further in advance.
So waiting has generally paid off recently.
Generally, yes, though the source did point out some exceptions, like around President's Day and spring break back in late March 2025. During those periods, the short lead time prices did rise, and it narrowed that gap between booking early and booking late.
Okay, so not always a guarantee. What about right now, these last few weeks?
Well, in the last 3 weeks, the source points out the gap between the long and short lead time prices has been pretty small. But, and this is critical, it's not because the last-minute prices suddenly shot up.
Oh, why then?
It was because the longer advanced prices were, and they used the term uncharacteristically weak.
Ah, so the early prices were just unusually low to begin with.
Exactly, which shrunk the potential savings from waiting.
Got it. Does the source give us any specific numbers on savings for right now?
Yeah, they do. For the cheapest rental at the airport, OGG, starting tomorrow, June 16th, booking today only offered about $31 in savings compared to booking 5 weeks ago.
$31. Not huge.
No, it was $226 today versus $257 5 weeks out. But for the off-airport rentals, the savings were actually more significant, about $51 a week saved by booking today.
Okay, $51, that's more like it.
Yeah, or about 25% less than that 5 weeks out price for off-airport.
Interesting difference between on and off airport there.
And overall, the source noted relatively little price sensitivity based on when you book recently, suggesting their advance estimates for the market were actually fairly close to the final prices seen closer to the date.
Okay, good to know. All right, second big strategy question. Is it cheaper to rent off airport, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, yes. The source confirms that usual rule tends to hold. Off-airport spots usually have lower base prices.
And why is that again?
It's mainly because of those higher mandatory taxes and fees that get tacked on specifically to airport rentals. You avoid some of those off-airport.
Right, the airport fees.
Yeah.
But we've seen that pattern get kind of messed up lately, haven't we?
Exactly. The source highlights that during this past winter and spring, 2025, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes strong demand combined with maybe limited supply at the off-airport locations actually made them more expensive than picking up right at the airport.
Okay, so the usual rule got flipped on its head for a while. What about this week, though, based on the latest survey?
Okay, so looking at the data from June 15th for rentals starting June 16th, the pattern of lower off-airport prices is back for some categories. Like economy, you mentioned $167 off airport versus $226 at the airport. Also, midsize, convertibles, and regular SUVs are cheaper off airport this week.
Okay, so back to normal for those.
But interestingly, for Jeeps and for minivans, remember those minivans with the huge price spike?
Yeah.
For those two categories, the lower prices this week are actually found at the airport.
Oh, wow. So it's completely flipped for them.
Seems like it this week. Plus, the source noted there was no off-airport availability listed at all this week for convertibles or those 7-seat SUVs.
None at all. Okay.
So the key takeaway here really is you absolutely need to check the specific vehicle category you want this week, because that historical pattern of off-airport is always cheaper. It's just not holding true across the board right now, especially, it seems, for those larger vehicles that are seeing all the price action.
Definitely need to compare for your specific needs then. Okay, that was a great deep dive into the Maui data specifically. But, to really get a feel for what's happening there, it helps to see how it compares. How does Maui stack up against the other main Hawaiian islands right now?
Good point. The source provides a quick survey snapshot. This is for the cheapest one-week rental, again starting June 16th from the 5 major airports.
Okay, let's hear it.
Honolulu H&L is $278. That's down 11% from last week.
Okay.
Maui, OGG, as we know, $184. That's down 22%.
Big drop there.
Kauai, LIH, is $267, up just 1%, basically flat.
Right.
Kona, KOA, on the Big Island, is $343. That's up a pretty substantial 38% this week.
Whoa, 38% jump at Kona.
Yeah. And Hilo, ITO, also Big Island, $257, down just 1%, also pretty flat.
So looking at those numbers, the really striking thing, according to the source,
is that Maui, OGG, despite that, moderate overall price drop this week, is still the cheapest of all the islands.
Still number one for savings.
And it's not just a fluke this week. It's held that position, the most affordable island for car rentals, for the 12th week in a row now.
12 weeks straight. That's significant, especially when you see a place like Kona jumping up 38% in the same week.
Definitely highlights different dynamics on each island.
It's probably helpful, too, just to quickly understand where this kind of detailed week-to-week info actually comes from.
Right.
How do they compile this?
Right. The source explains their method. Basically, they track prices every single week for 7 different vehicle categories, specifically from multiple companies at Kahului Airport, OGG.
Okay, 7 categories, multiple companies.
Yeah, and they've been doing this consistently since July 2024 for most categories, and even longer for economy cars, going back to July 2023. So that gives them really valuable historical context.
Allows them to see the trends over time.
Exactly. And for this week's survey, for example, they included data from 14 different rental companies. They pulled this from major booking sites like rentalcars.com and rentals.mauicarental.biz.
14 companies. Wow.
Yeah, so it's this consistent multi-source tracking week after week that allows them to identify these changes, these trends, all the stuff we've been talking about.
Makes sense. Okay, so we just took a really comprehensive deep dive into the Maui rental car market, looking specifically at mid-June 2025 and pulling all those insights directly from the source material you shared.
Yeah, and just to kind of synthesize the key takeaways for you, the listener, we saw generally low base prices this week, right? Moderate decreases for smaller cars.
But then those dramatic, really unexpected spikes for the larger family-sized vehicles like minivans and 7-seat SUVs.
Exactly. And the July 4th holiday forecast, based on how those advanced bookings are looking right now, seems surprisingly affordable, especially compared to last year's surge.
Although, as the source warned, there's always that small outside risk of a last-minute surge. Maybe driven by operational issues, not necessarily pure demand. Something to keep in the back of your mind.
Right. And figuring out the best booking strategy for you, should you book last minute or in advance, airport or off airport, it really requires checking your specific vehicle category and dates this week.
Yeah, because those usual rules of thumb, they just aren't holding true across the board right now, especially, it seems, for those popular larger vehicles.
And the big picture note. Right now, Maui stands out. It's the most affordable Hawaiian island overall for car rentals.
And has been for 12 weeks straight now, which is pretty remarkable despite all the dynamics playing out within its own market.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, whether you're actively planning that Maui trip or maybe just trying to save a buck on travel anywhere, or perhaps you just want to understand the forces shaping these prices.
Seeing this level of specific, timely data really helps you make more informed decisions or, just appreciate the complex, dynamic strategies that these rental companies are constantly employing it's quite a game.
It really is. And at least it's with kind of an important question to mull over, doesn't it?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, if those dramatic price spikes for the large vehicles are truly signaling a surge in seasonal family travel, like the source hypothesized, does that point towards travel patterns, maybe shifting back towards pre-pandemic norms?
Or are those huge percentage increases maybe more a sign of, say, limited supply catching companies off guard, like we discussed with that operational squeeze risk? Maybe it's not purely demand-driven.
Right. And then how does that really visible week-to-week competition we saw, between players like 6T and Thrifty?
Yeah.
And how does that ultimately shape the final price that you see when you finally hit that book button?
Yeah, lots to think about there. How much is demand versus supply versus company strategy? It's a fascinating mix.